Welcome to Seek Reality with Roberta Grimes. Joyous conversations about what the afterlife evidence and modern science combine to tell us is true about our one reality. You have nothing to fear. You are eternal and you are perfectly loved. Knowing the truth changes everything. Now, here's Roberta.
Welcome to Seek Reality. I'm Roberta Grimes, and I'm so glad you're with us today. Everyone who lives a sufficiently long life is eventually going to see parents die. My mother and I were so close that even as a young adult, I couldn't bear the thought of her ever dying. But by the time she actually did transition, she was 93. She had no activities of daily living, and I didn't even cry. I was so glad for her. She was young again, and as it turns out, she's more spiritually elevated than I thought she was. She's currently having the time of her afterlife, traveling in places you and I cannot even imagine. That is my mom. I'm so proud of her. The first thing she said to me when I communicated with her after her death was, "You were right about everything," which was a heck of a validation now that I think about it. But it's very hard to have our parents die. Even if you've spent your life studying what happens and you're pretty sure what happens after death, to see the body in a casket, to see people put into the ground is a terrible experience. Many people don't realize that, in fact, our lives are eternal. Many people think that when they put a parent into a casket, that parent has ceased to be. They will never see that person again. And for some people, that is one of the most horrible experiences you can imagine. The thought was in my mind as I read the book that was written by our guest today, that we have got to help everybody understand the truth, because the truth is so glorious and people go through so much pain. Mike Anthony, our guest today, didn't know that his much beloved father had survived. The death happened at a time and in a way that was totally unexpected. He wasn't even sick. He was just suddenly dead. What did that mean? So the glorious, glorious thing that he then learned, he shares with us in a wonderful book, which is called Love, Dad, How My Father Died, and then told me he didn't. Now, I know nearly everybody who dies and leaves people behind that they love sends back what I think of as postcards, signs of their survival. Most people don't know how to look for the signs. They don't recognize them when they see them. And so even though poor Mike was getting signs, he wasn't really sure that that's what was happening. So anyway, his book is wonderful, and I want him to tell you some of the things he did to satisfy himself that Dad was still alive. So, Mike, welcome. It's so glad to have you with us today. It's exciting to have you talk about some amazing things I have not done. I think this is wonderful.
Hi, Roberta. It's a thrill to be here. Thanks so much for having me.
The first thing people like to do when they're listening is to kind of get to know you a little bit. So can you tell us because you have an interesting career too on top of it all. What do you do? And tell us about the day that Dad left you.
Yeah, I live a very interesting life. By day, I am studying the evidence suggestive of the survival of consciousness beyond death. And by night, I am the bar manager for Hamilton on Broadway, the Broadway show. So that's how I spend my days, a varied sort of existence.
But you weren't always studying the afterlife. Suddenly, this is an important topic for you, and you're going to do a documentary on it, right?
I mean, the idea of life after death and the quote unquote paranormal and all of that has always been of interest to me, in a back burner sort of a way. You know, I've long felt that we are much more than our bodies. But at the same time, I've also always loved science, you know, and science, the mainstream scientific view is unequivocal on this. You know,
That's right.
Yeah. They tell us, we're told the materialist paradigm says that when you die, you die, you know, period, end of story. And even though I'd never completely believed that, when my dad suddenly and shockingly passed, I was being crushed by every lecture any biology professor ever gave me, because I ended up going to college. I was going to be a science teacher, a high school science teacher. So yeah, when my dad out of the blue passed, and, you know, we were incredibly close. My dad was just an amazing guy, not your average human being. And he was only 60, by the way.
My Lord, that's terrible.
Yep, and a young 60, you know, that the day he died, he was playing
Yeah.
basketball with his grandson,
Oh,
just as alive as could be. And so his death was completely, from our perspective, out of the blue.
yes.
So
Yes.
that's what happened to me. I went into a full-blown existential crisis, thinking that if science was right and my dad was gone forever, as though he'd never been here, you know, I was thinking, then what is the point of anything at all?
What's the point?
Yeah.
Exactly. Very, very true. Yes, that is the first, I think, reaction people have. I mean, life sucks, then you die is
Hmm.
kind of a depressing way to look at the world, right?
Yeah, that's no fun. You know, it's like,
No.
why am I? You know, I was really starting to think. You know, what in the world? Why do we build skyscrapers
Right.
and museums and all of this stuff if all we are is a blip on the universe's radar of infinite time and space? You know, why am I going to leave my apartment this morning and do anything at all if it's
Yeah.
just going to disappear? So that's sort of
Vanity
the,
of vanity. All
yeah.
is vanity. That's right. But you started to get some signs. You just didn't like the butterfly thing was
Oh
pretty
yeah.
dramatic. You kept getting butterflies, but you weren't really sure. I mean, you know, how could that happen? Even inside a building, you found butterflies. And you still weren't sure that was happening.
Yeah, I mean, I now realize that my dad, my poor dad, was
Yes.
positively working overtime. You know, he
Yeah.
finally gets to the other side when you're supposed to be in perfect bliss and just relax and enjoy yourself, and
Yes.
his family is now begging him for communication and signs. And the poor guy was giving them, you know, day after day. He was all of these incredible
You
things.
didn't even recognize them. I felt so bad for him.
Yeah.
Part of the problem, I should just tell everyone, is in this case, he was feeling unwell. He just sort of lay down for a minute on the floor, and he was out of his body, and that was it. So he sort of left in a way that he knew would be traumatic for them, and it was traumatic for them to find. And so he was trying. He was really trying. But it's important to emphasize the fact that your loved ones will try, but it isn't easy to make these signs work. My book, The Fun of Staying in Touch, talks about how they give us some of these signs, and I got some spectacular ones from my mom, but I knew I'd get them anyway. But if you don't know what to look for, like that, those butterflies are classic.
Oh yeah.
But
Yeah.
if you don't know what to look for, so tell us what you did then. You decided to investigate all the skeptics because they would for sure help you figure out that there was life after death, right? Not very.
Well, what initially happened is, you know, mediumship is something that most people seek out, right? They're grieving,
Right.
and that could be a tool that they use in the grieving process. But in our case, mediumship just splashed into our lives out of nowhere when a
Yeah.
phone call came into our house from someone claiming that a medium had contacted him to let us know that my father was desperately trying to get messages to us. That he
Oh,
was okay.
bless the man.
So yeah, he had found a complete stranger, by the way. This medium was not anyone that we'd ever met or that my father had ever met, and yet he found her somehow out in Arizona, and we live in Connecticut, and she ended up contacting us to let us know that she was getting messages from this deceased stranger who was just not going to give up until we got the message that he was okay. So that was fabulous and very exciting. But again, given my scientific bent, you know,
Yeah.
I was going to need evidence, you know, before I could completely believe this, of course. So that's when we start. Eventually, I ended up testing mediums
Yes.
by making a documentary and sitting them in front of a camera and then walking total strangers into the room and having them do readings, having one particular medium, one medium in particular, do readings for now over 20 people that I filmed, and watching her over and over again change people's lives and get information in a way that I could not understand and that science says is impossible. So that's how the journey, how the investigation really began.
But these mediums, and Your dad really tried hard. It's very clear. I want to stress to people it isn't easy at first for people to do this. One of our friends, Mikey Morgan, spends a lot of his eternal time teaching people who have just arrived there how to reach out and how to give signs. And there is your poor dad. He's giving you butterflies. You still don't believe him. And you asked him at one point, or you said, "Okay, Dad, say something about hair." Out of nowhere. Another time it was socks. And he always did it. And still you're not sure. Well, I'm not really sure.
Yeah. I was giving him specific message. Before I saw a medium, I would say, "Dad, I need you to say this very specific thing, or I'm not going to believe this." And he was doing it. He was getting those messages through. I now think that this is a skill like anything else. And as you said, you have a friend over there who's teaching people. I think my dad happens to be amazingly good at this particular
he certainly became good, I have to say. I want to make sure we talk about the physical mediumship, because that's something I've never seen that done. What your dad managed to do. So I think it's really quite wonderful. But then you went through, so you did the mediums, and then you decide what made you want to talk or learn about the ideas of Randy and Shermer and Penn Jillette. Why?
Well, because I'm thinking that, again, I'm a guy of average intelligence, right? The scientists that I had studied my whole life, including, Einstein, these people are geniuses. And I'm thinking, if people with this intellectual heft are telling me there's no way that my dad could have survived the death of his brain, I must be missing something. What am I missing?
Yes.
If these super smart people are telling me it can't be true. And so that's why I wanted to investigate what they had to say about it. But then I came to find that most of these skeptics, and I won't call them skeptics, I'll call them debunkers. It's something stronger than skepticism.
I think that's very smart. You're absolutely right. That's what they are.
And so they a priori have decided, have made a decision that there's no such thing as anything paranormal because for whatever reason they have not experienced it in their own lives. But I quickly came to discover that with no matter how much authority they tell you there's no such thing as anything paranormal, they have not done the research themselves. They haven't done the research.
No, they haven't.
Yeah, and yet they'll stand on a pedestal and they'll speak in such declarative terms that there is no life after death, there is nothing paranormal. But when you really look into it, and I spoke with them, I ended up meeting these people, like a guy named Michael Shermer, who's the editor of Skeptic magazine. When I questioned him about some of these things, I was shocked to find out how little he knew about specifically one of the topics we were talking about.
Right. No, they just – you're right. A priori, it can't happen, and therefore it doesn't happen, and therefore I'm an expert saying it doesn't happen. And in point of fact, any open-minded person who does – as you prove in your book – I really enjoyed your book, by the way. I was cheering at the end. But anybody who actually does the research, it is 100%. The chance that you will learn the truth and that the truth will truly set you free, as Jesus said, is 100%. You won't worry about anything ever again in your life because you'll know the truth. Your life is eternal. This is just a little minute out of eternity, this whole life that you have here. And that's what these people, these awful debunker people, are trying to take from you, to keep you from looking further and investigating and learning and knowing the truth. And that's the evil that they promulgate. You're right, absolutely right. There's no stronger way you can say it than that they're debunkers and they do it for their own egos.
I do think, that I was just going to say, I think ego is really sort of the driving force behind all of that, because some of the evidence is so strong that even journals like JAMA, the Journal of the American Medical Association, which is one of the most respected scientific journals in the world, certainly
That's
America,
right.
probably the world, when JAMA took a look at some of the research being done at the University of Virginia, for instance, the Division of Perceptual Studies, they concluded, the book editor for JAMA concluded that reincarnation was the most likely explanation for the data gathered at UVA. That's JAMA saying that. So yes, I think you're right that if people can get past their own ego or whatever wall it is that has been built up that does not allow this information to penetrate for some reason, if they can get past it and actually look, there is astounding evidence out there that even the most hardened skeptic would have to say is compelling.
Yes. I mean, it's the chances are 100% plus that there is a life after death. But here is poor Mike, who really wants to know, and there is no place he easily can find the answer. There needs to be a place where someone like you, Mike, can just go, okay, I want to learn this. I want to see the background. I really want to believe it if it's true. But if it's not true, I don't want to have to believe it.
Yeah, I mean, that's why I ended up writing the book, because the things that happened to me, and of course it's a long story and it's much more than just mediumship. There are things that happened that completely upended my sense of reality, like 100% for sure.
I saw that.
As you know, yeah. But the reason I ended up writing the book is because it so changed my life having this information. It completely changes everything. And it actually felt unfair to keep this to myself. I mean, the information should be available for those who seek it. And that's why the book is there. And the information is there for those who seek it. If you go, you might have to go through to some lengths to find some of it, but it is out there.
So you ended up then eventually looking into various kinds of mediumship. You began to be very comfortable with good spiritual or mental mediums, right? You had some good. You really had some good experiences. You were lucky. I should just tell people that I am a skeptic when it comes to mental mediums. I mean, these people are mind reading with the dead, and I have we all have our character flaws. My biggest character flaw is I just don't believe in mental mediumship, and I've had wonderful readings, but that's my flaw. I mean, if you can get past the notion that it's hard to believe they're mind reading with dead people, and there are some very good mediums out there, and I just hope that you all find a good one. There are also a lot who are not good and who do cold reading and other things, which you know what my problem was? I did a lot of research because I really wanted to find the best mediums, and I went to probably in 1 year I went to 20, 30 mediums, and my loved ones got sick to death of it. Pardon me.
Yeah.
I got sick of it. The first one did a wonderful job, but she wasn't necessarily the best one. She certainly wasn't the most expensive one. But by the third or fourth reading, within a month and a half, nobody was showing up except my brother-in-law, and he was being very plucky, but everybody else didn't bother because what's wrong with this woman? And I didn't realize till years later that was why I had such horrible readings, but it scarred me for life. Actually, this was 20-some years ago.
Yeah, it's definitely true that mediumship, I think, like anything else, there's a scale from people who are tremendously good at it all the way down to people who are not good at it, and then there are also, as you said, unfortunately, people out there who are outright lying. I mean, that is definitely part of it. And it's why mediumship in general has such a bad name and why it's so hard to get respected scientists to take a look at this. There are a few brave ones out there connected to respected universities and research institutions who are doing this work, but not many. And that's because it's very difficult for a scientist of any sort of renown or respect to go to their board of directors and say, hey, I want to do a study on mediumship, because mediumship has such a dark cloud over it because there has been so much fraud in the past.
But talk about Julie Bichel's work. I really admire her. I think she's very young and she's just done a wonderful job. And she does quintuple blind studies.
Yeah.
Talk about that.
Yeah, Dr. Julie Bichel she runs the Windbridge Research Center in Arizona, which is an amazing place, and she basically single-handedly got this research underway after working at the University of Arizona for a while. And quintuple blind protocols. I won't get into exactly what that means. The bottom line is they have ruled out during their experiments any possible way that they could fathom a person could cheat. So the people who they work with that call themselves mediums, they never even see the person they're doing the reading for instance. There's a proxy sitter, and they do it over the phone. So there's no way there could be any cold reading going on or any of the typical tricks that people who do fake this use to create the illusion that they're talking with our deceased loved one. So with her quintuple blind protocol, you can be sure there's no cheating going on. Whatever information is coming from the medium's own brain in some way. And Dr. Beischel has concluded, to her, it's without a doubt, mediumship is a genuine phenomenon. She calls it anomalous information reception, right? To put a scientific spin on it. And of course, she can't say for sure 100% that it's dead people that is giving this information. It could be, as you mentioned, telepathy, mind reading of a living brain in some way.
Yes.
We don't understand the mechanisms of all of that. But in her experiments, without a doubt, she says anomalous information is a real thing. There are people who can gather information using some pathway that science currently says is impossible, and yet it happens.
Now she has tested some mediums. Does she still have them on her website so people can go there and say, oh, this medium is one that Julie has found actually can do this work?
I believe they stopped doing that because it was taking up so much of their resources to do those tests. However,
it's too bad.
Yes, but there is another wonderful nonprofit organization called the Forever Family Foundation.
Okay, they still do it? Okay, good.
They still do it, and they have a list on their website of certified mediums. So anyone who's on their list, what certified means that the medium has been tested under controlled conditions and been found to have true mediumistic ability.
I think it's very important, if anyone is thinking of consulting a medium, to find one that at least comes well recommended, that has been tested in some way. Because as I say, there are many, because it's really pretty easy to fake it. I'm surprised how easy it is. If you're older, well, probably it's your, parents who've died. If you're younger, it's your grandparents.
Yeah.
I mean, and once they can tell by your reaction, if they're very good at it, where to go from there. It's really spooky what they could do.
Yeah, and we help. We help them
That's
very
right,
easily
because
without
we want
noticing.
to be
Yes,
real.
we're so desperate. Of
Right.
course, we're so desperate. So the human brain, it's just the way that it's built. There's something called patternicity. I write about this in the book a bit. It's very easy to be fooled by a medium, and we help them along in that process. So yes, I agree. It's important to be careful about who you go to.
Okay, so let's talk about just briefly the University of Virginia. Many people have heard of Ian Stevenson, and I frankly, I'm certain that what the work he did was real. And now Jim Tucker you met with him, right? And he is really a worthy successor, I think, to the great Dr. Stevenson.
Yes, Dr. Tucker is a brilliant guy. Once I figured out that mediumship, what I was seeing appeared to me to be real. I had done, again, a ton of filming by this point and came to the conclusion that this is real. And so if that is true, that some people are able to connect with information that's not in their brain that is supposedly coming from my dead father, are there any other lines of evidence that suggest we survived the death of our body, that we're not just our body? And there's a ton, as you know, out there, like near-death experiences, end-of-life experiences, all of this stuff. But for people who are skeptical, for me, the thing that blew me completely away was what they're doing, what Dr. Ian Stevenson started over 60 years ago now. 60 years of studies at the University of Virginia into children who have spontaneous memories that are not from this life, that they claim are from their last life or a previous life. And as astounding as it sounds, there are cases, thousands of them, that are verified, meaning that the child, and often these children are 2 and 3 years old. So we're talking real little children here who are not concocting some huge scam. These little children are coming up with enough details of a previous life. Sometimes this person, lives hundreds of miles away and they lived 50 years ago. There's no way that this 2-year-old child could have been going down to the local library and looking up information, and they'll give a name often, a street that they lived on. They'll say, my mom's name was Barbara. We had a dog named Dewey, and we lived near a baseball field. They'll give all of these points, all of these checkable, verifiable items. And sometimes if they give enough, such as a last name, we're able to find the person they're talking about. And Dr. Ian Stevenson and now Dr. Jim Tucker would go to that place, knock on the door, find out, sure enough, there was a dog named Dewey that had lived there. It is by a baseball field. The mom's name was Barbara. Again, there are now thousands, over 2,500 solved cases. And it's just incredible data, incredible amounts of data.
It's important to point out that this is not how reincarnation normally happens. Reincarnation normally happens after a completed death. We do our normal transition, and we plan our next lifetime. And most of us have probably had hundreds of lifetimes on Earth over a long period of time. But according to our friend again, wonderful friend Mikey Morgan, close to 25% of people who die, especially if it's not at a planned exit point, if they're killed in an accident or with murder or some violent kind of death, usually, they often don't immediately transition. And these cases seem to be cases where someone was killed unexpectedly, not at an exit point, and didn't properly transition. And they hung around or they traveled around. And they eventually, I think it's a case actually of spirit possession. They find a pregnant woman, they possess the fetus. And then when they're born, that's who they are. I think that's what happens. I've studied this quite a bit, and I think that's what happens. But it's very, very real, and it's really amazing.
Very real, yeah. And there are a lot of cases where the child has what they call intermission memories, which is what you're talking about. And they'll say, yeah, I remember seeing my mommy, walking on the beach. Mommy and daddy were on the beach, and I thought they would be nice. And so that's how they chose their new parents.
That's right. Exactly. Yeah, fascinating. I think it's just, anyway, we have to talk about what he did when you finally got to a physical medium's sitting. Talk about that. This is the big climax, folks. If you're driving, stay on the road. All right, talk about it, because I've never quite heard a story quite like this. Talk about it.
This is the thing that completely turned my worldview upside down. So mediumship we can divide into two categories: mental mediumship, which is the one that we're talking about that most people are familiar with. It's John Edward and Crossing Over and the Long Island Medium and those popular mediums. That's mental mediumship, where the person is staying conscious and they claim to be receiving information that they're then translating to you. In physical mediumship, which is a completely different form, the person goes into a deep trance, supposedly, and so deep that they claim they remember nothing that happens while they are in that trance. It's as though they are falling asleep. And at that point, and we do know that they do go into deep trances, by the way. We can verify with science, because we've used EEG, electroencephalograms, hooked up to mediums' brains, including the medium that I sat with, a guy named Stuart Alexander. And we know that his brainwave pattern definitely shifts from a waking brain state into something else. So we do know that there is definitely something changing in the brain. That we can say for sure. So once they're in that deep state of trance, what physical mediums say is that the spirit world is then able to use that medium's body and their physical apparatus to communicate, sometimes using the medium's actual vocal cords and speaking through the medium's vocal cords, but in the spirit's own words. Or sometimes they are able to physically manifest in some way there in the room, and then speak out of their own vocal cords that they've temporarily fashioned out of something called ectoplasm, which was a word that I was sure came from the movie Ghostbusters. I'm sure that was fake. But it's not. Ectoplasm is actually a substance. The term was coined by a guy named Charles Richet, who won the Nobel Prize in physiology. So this is not some mad scientist. This guy won the Nobel Prize, and apparently ectoplasm is a substance that some people have. And some people have it in abundance, apparently, and those would be the physical mediums. And when they go into this trance state, the spirit world is able to extract that substance. It comes out of people in sometimes it looks like a fog or like a smoky mist. It can also appear as like silk. It takes sort of different forms. And I know that this sounds crazy, by the way. I mean, I know that this sounds nuts.
It's crazy but true.
Crazy but true. And when I saw it happen with my own eyes, through, again, I tell the whole story in the book, but I ended up getting the honor, having the life-changing honor of sitting with a guy named Stuart Alexander in a small town in England. And I saw ectoplasm. I saw a substance that came out of this guy it's very difficult to describe the fluid movement of this substance, but it moves in a way that would be impossible to fake. That's what I can say. It has this incredible otherworldly quality about the way that it moves. And it turned from this amorphous blob into a fully formed human hand right in front of my eyes. And then my friend shook it so she could feel the bones in the hand. She felt the warmth of the hand, the smooth skin of the hand. Then she let go of his hand, and I was I was kneeling down by the table where this was happening. So this happened 5 inches from my face. When she let go of that hand, I watched it disappear, Roberta. It dissolved and then disappeared in front of my face. And that was the moment where I thought, okay, it doesn't matter how many Nobel Prizes might be sitting on a scientist's shelf. If they tell you there's no such thing as anything paranormal, I now know that they are incorrect about that.
But that was only the prelude. Then what did your dad do?
Well, so another thing that they can do is use the ectoplasm to again, as I said, materialize there in the room sometimes. What happened in my case is I was sitting near the medium, and suddenly my dad's face formed in the air in front of the medium's face. As though it were floating maybe a couple of inches in front of the medium's face. My dad had a beard, and I suddenly saw the beard form right in front of my face. And then my dad talked to me out of his face floating in front of me. He spoke. And I mean,
were you sober? We first have to ask that. Were you sober when this happened?
Completely sober. No magic mushrooms or hallucinogenic drugs of any kind. I've never been more sober in my life. Even though in the moment I was saying, "What am I seeing?" I remember saying out loud, "What is happening right now?" I mean, it was completely. It was a paradigm shifting event. It really is quite a thing when something that stark happens that lets you know the world is not the way that you thought it was.
Right. And he spoke and he said sensible things. He said he was sorry that he was found on the floor, right? And there's no way anybody in the room could have known that.
No, he specifically mentioned that he was on his office floor, and that's where we found him, on the floor of his home office. And we had told no one about where he was. It was not in an obituary, not published on Facebook or online anywhere. No one outside of me and my immediate family knew that my dad died on his office floor in his house. So
wonderful?
When he said that, I mean, truly, it took my breath away. I thought I was going to pass out. You can imagine how shocking it would be to see your dead dad's face suddenly talking to you from a foot away. So completely changed my life, my sense of reality, and it lightened my life. I mean, I now know
that's what it does. You're right.
Yes. Oh yeah. Yeah. I mean, I now have zero question about it. I now have 100%. I'm 100% convinced that my dad truly is still alive. He's still alive, and to know that changes everything. It just changes everything.
It does. I think it's difficult to describe to people what the difference is. There was a time I wasn't sure. That's why I kept doing research. There was a time you were sure it wasn't true. There's no way. I mean, you turned to dust, right? But you did the research. And when you do the research, you do find out. And there does come a point, everyone, where you realize there's no possible way this is not real.
Yeah. Yeah. It's an interesting experience now because, like, I feel like, sometimes I'll be out, like, at the grocery store, I'm buying my carrots, and I'll think, my gosh, no one else in this produce aisle right now knows that every Monday in a little room in England, the veil between this world and another one completely breaks down and spirits, like, walk around the room. I'm, like, buying my carrots and thinking about that. So, it is kind of I feel like I'm living almost in two movies. Like, I'm in one movie and everyone else is in another.
Yes, yes. But the peace that it gives you, I mean, there is no such thing as an end to your life. You will always live. You will always be aware. You will always, always be. And knowing that, there's nothing that can bother you.
Yeah, I mean, when you're not, I write in the book, I start writing about the show The Good Place, which is a popular television show that's about these people who find themselves in the afterlife. And there's this great scene where one of the humans is trying to tell one of these immortal beings what it's like to be a human. And he's just not grasping it because he's immortal and he knows he's immortal. And she says to him, we're all aware of death. So we're all a little bit sad all the time.
That's right.
And And once you come to the conclusion that there is no such thing as death,
you're never sad again in your life. That is so true.
Not in that way. Yeah. I mean, when you're not constantly worrying about the end of the trip itself becomes the thing that you can focus on, right? You can enjoy every moment now when you're not so worried about where it's headed.
And you also start saying, what can I do now that will make my afterlife as wonderful as possible? I mean, there's my mother. She's doing traveling I never would dream she was able to do. I think she's at least 4th level. And she was I should just say my mother was a lovely person, but I didn't, I think, judge her to be quite as advanced as she is. But she's having a heck of a time. So maybe the next step for people who really get it is, okay, how can I do the most in this life to make for the most fun in the next life? I mean, Mikey Morgan is 6th level. He can go anywhere and do anything. That's a heck of a lot of fun to have.
Yeah. No, that's true. I've done a lot of thinking again now that I am absolutely convinced that we have the choice to do this again if we want to, and probably have done this, as you said, hundreds, if not thousands of times. Yes. I'm already, every once in a while, I think, oh, you know what? Next time around, I'm gonna do this. Like I make these little mental notes about my for the planning of my next phase. Like, next time I've decided I'm going to come back. I was watching American Idol, and I've decided next time I'm going to come back with a fantastic voice because I want to be a good singer.
Oh, wouldn't that be nice? I would love to be a singer too. No one wants to hear me sing. They actually move away from me in churches and wherever I happen to be. But in life, we are in death. I mean, your dad got up that day. He didn't know that he was going to end up dying on that floor. Knowing that in life we are in death, isn't it glorious to know that death is nothing but a bigger, greater, and more wonderful life? It's a better life. By the way, don't kill yourself because then it screws it up. You gotta go. You gotta do the voyage, but just know the destination is glorious. It's just glorious.
Oh yeah.
You quoted Steve Jobs' sister, and I just want to mention that. She did an obituary for her brother, and she wrote about his last conscious moments in his bed as he slipped from this life surrounded by those he loved. And she says, after looking deliberately into each of their faces, saying goodbye one by one, and he's showing with his eyes how deep his love ran, she says he seemed to see something beyond them. He stared at an upper corner of the room. This happens, by the way, in upper corners of the rooms all the time. And as his eyes grew wide and he said his last words, he said, "Oh, wow. Oh, wow. Oh, wow." And that was big news at the time he died. But that's what happens at our deathbed. People come for us who have gone on ahead, and they look young, they look beautiful, and it is an overwhelming thing. Once they appear, people often stop talking to the living. It's a beautiful, beautiful moment. When we glimpse the wider world.
Yes, that's one of the things that gives me the most comfort. I did a lot of research into those, what they call ELEs, or end-of-life experiences. And if you talk to almost any hospice nurse, almost any, chances
Yes.
are they're going to have a story that's going to bring you some comfort. There's a Netflix series that I'm involved in called Surviving Death, and it's on Netflix now. And in one of our episodes, I think it's episode 5, we followed Dr. Christopher Kerr, who heads up the hospice program in Buffalo, I believe it is. And he's just a fantastic guy. He was a strict materialist scientist. You know, he thought there's absolutely no such thing as anything after death.
Yes.
Until he started to have these experiences with hospice patients. And it obviously completely, like me, it completely changed his life. And it's just so comforting. Death does not have to be as scary as we think it is. We spend so much time worrying about death. But as it turns out, it's often for the person experiencing it a beautiful experience.
It's glorious. My book about death is called The Fun of Dying. And when people say, "How could you say it's fun?" Actually, the word fun understates the joy of going home with people you had thought you'd never see again. Your dad will be there, young and just full of beans, to come and take you home. And also pets, by the way. It's the best time of your life. I'm so sorry we're coming toward the end of our time. Your website is mikeanthony.com, right? No
That's correct.
punctuation, one word. And can people email you?
Sure. Yeah, I've been getting a lot of messages, especially since the Netflix show aired, and I love getting people's stories. I've heard so many fascinating stories. So, yes, please do.
So, and it's info@mikeanthony.com, right?
That's right.
Okay. Super, super. Okay. Oh, my dear friends, this has been wonderful. This can be you. You can have this certainty. Please understand that. That's one reason I was so happy to have you on today, Mike, because I knew you would be able to help people see it's not just Roberta, it's everybody. Everybody who does the studying learns the certain truth that your own life is eternal, and so is the life of everyone you know and have ever known. This is just a little afternoon of spending extra time at school. That's all this is. And we go home and we are full of joy. Thank you so much for being here, Mike. This has been fun.
I've had such a great time, really. Thank you very much for having me.
Everyone, this has been Seek Reality with Roberta Grimes, and I'm so glad you were here. I hope you take something wonderful away from this. Next week, we'll be talking with Michelle Blood. She's tried to be with us twice in the past. Let's hope this third time it's going to work. We'll be talking about her book, The Magic of Affirmation Power. Michelle teaches something that I also talk a lot about, and it's a technique that can work beautifully for you, too. She teaches the power of affirmations. I have found that gratitude affirmations, and we'll talk about this next week, are the most powerful way to pray. And we'll talk about how Michelle uses a set of Hindu teachings to elevate human consciousness. So we're going to have a broad range of things to talk about that will help you in your personal life to make the most of your relationship with the eternal, with the divine. Please join us next week. I think you're going to really enjoy this. I especially love affirmations. We had Dr. Hogan on to replace her a month ago now, when she suddenly had a conflict, I thought he did a beautiful job. And it's going to be fun to see what Michelle has to tell us. So please join us. And this week we've been talking with Mike Anthony. Mike went through this common experience. He lost a very beloved father unexpectedly. That's common. It often happens. But he didn't believe for a word, for a minute, that his father was still aware, still alive anywhere, but he had to find out. And what I loved about his book is that, we see his pain, we see his hope, we see it dashed. We see him saying, well, I'm just not going to give up. I mean, this is a man who had to work hard to find his dad. And when he found his dad, it was worth all that effort. The book is called Love Dad. how my father died, and it told me he didn't. A skeptic's proof there is life after death. I found it delightful, and I was really rooting toward the end for something spectacular to happen, and then when it did, I was cheering. So I love it when a book does that for me. Of course, my own nonfiction books are Liberating Jesus, My Thomas, The Fun of Dying, The Fun of Staying in Touch, The Fun of Growing Forever, The Fun of Living Together, and The Fun of Meeting Jesus is a children's book. It's a beautiful book. I can say that. I didn't draw the illustrations. You can order all of my books through bookstores or on Amazon.com, and the adult books are also available as audiobooks. If you want to talk about any of my books, or if you want to talk about what we talked about today, or anything at all, if you have questions, you always can contact me through the green contact block on RobertaGrimes.com. I answer every email. It just can take a few days because I get so many. Please make sure, though, that you give me your correct email address. If you don't hear from me, it bounced. I'm sorry about that, but so just try again. Past episodes of Seek Reality are available on webtalkradio.net, realrevolutionradio.com, and just about everywhere that you can get podcasts. You can find Seek Reality at this point. There even is an app in the iTunes store, and actually I've discovered it's everywhere, a Seek Reality app. So if you just have that free app, you'll get the episodes, or you should get them spontaneously. Meanwhile, we've come to the end of our time. This has been Seek Reality with Roberta Grimes. Please enjoy and make the most of this coming week in our one eternal reality, knowing that you are a powerful, eternal being, and you in particular, most of all, in the entire universe and the greater reality, you are infinitely loved.
You've been listening to Seek Reality with Roberta Grimes. Roberta blogs and answers questions at robertagrimes.com. Join us every week as we explore what the afterlife evidence and modern science combine to tell us is true about the one reality we all share. Knowing the truth changes everything.